From the campus of the University of Kentucky, this is Behind the Blue. I'm Kody Kiser with UK Strategic Communications. Artificial intelligence is moving fast, and it's already changing everything from education to healthcare to the way we communicate and make decisions. So what does it look like for a state to put smart AI guardrails in place without slamming the brakes on innovation? Today, I'm joined by Kentucky State Senator Amanda Bledsoe, a Lexington native and a UK alum, to talk about her journey into public service, what she's hearing from constituents, and how she sees the University of Kentucky fulfilling its land-grant mission across the Commonwealth. And then we dig into the heart of the conversation, Kentucky's approach to responsible AI governance, what Senate Bill 4 is designed to do, and why transparency and privacy matter as government begins using these tools. We also talk about concerns like AI-generated deceptive political content, protecting minors, and how UK can help shape Kentucky's AI future from research to workforce training. And now, here's my conversation with Senator Amanda Bledsoe. Senator Amanda Bledsoe is our guest today on Behind the Blue. Senator, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thanks for having me.
So for people who don't know you, I want to kind of jump into a little bit of your backstory and kind of your journey through public service. You were raised here in Lexington. For somebody who grew up here, what were your early impressions of UK?
Well, my grandmother actually went to UK. And so we had a large UK presence in our house. My grandfather used to joke that she was a nutritionist. And so she actually fed some of Rupp's runts back in the day. So now she wouldn't say that, but my grandfather was quick to tell you about my grandmother's relationship to UK sports and UK basketball. So we grew up very much supporting the university. I think if you were a football fan or a sports fan, you kind of just did by nature. And it's an amazing institution and something that I think from a young age you've kind of followed.
You went away for college, but then you came back for your master's here at UK. You were at the Patterson School. What did that time at UK, what did that add to, I know the Patterson School, you were looking at big global things, but also how did that kind of change your look at Kentucky and state policy and things like that?
Well, you know, I think when you are raised in Lexington, you kind of want to go away for college, which is kind of what I did, but you always come home. Sometimes it takes being away to appreciate what you have. And Lexington is such a unique community, and the university is such a unique institution. And so I think the Patterson School really offered for me as a way to have a graduate degree, a master's program that had a large depth and breadth of not just the global picture of international affairs, but also how those international affairs play directly into the community. When you think about Toyota and international trade, you think about bourbon and having the global presence that it does. So we have a lot of international presence and international work here, actually just in the Bluegrass area. And the university plays a big part in some of those conversations. So it was a great time. I was here during 9/11. Studying international affairs, and so that was a fascinating time to see kind of the world dynamics and foreign policy change really day to day, and discussing how that impacted not just the U.S., but Kentucky in particular.
You're at the Patterson School, you're studying things on a global scale. When you get finished, you really have a multitude of directions that you could go in as far as a career. What led you down the path of deciding that you wanted to go into public service and serve in that capacity?
Sure. I had one professor, Bart Herbison, who was the Council of State Government's policy director, who also taught at the Patterson School. And so he had one of our alternate dispute resolution classes that I took and helped him with, because I had extra time at CSG. I interned with him, and then he employed me. And I got a chance to work on state international trade offices, which most of the states have, which was a lot of fun at CSG. But we also were having every state set up their Homeland Security office, which at that time was pretty critical back in the day. And so I got to be a part of kind of each state developing what was going to be their Homeland Security office within the governor's executive cabinet. So that was a really fun time to be at the Council of State Governments. And that really kind of entered in the public policy background for me and how important states play a role in the global affairs and also that relationship locally. And so public service, my dad was a minister, and I've kind of grown up with having a public service mindset. And it just seemed like a natural pathway for me to work on public policy that actually impacted people's lives, helped them, and have a different voice maybe at the table than had been there before.
You served on Lexington Fayette Urban County Council beginning in 2015. Mm-hmm. Was there a moment on council when you thought, I've been involved in this, I've done a lot of work here, I want to scale this work up now. I want to go to from a smaller citywide level to more of a state influence kind of level?
Absolutely. I think when you first get on public service or an elected official job, you're not sure if you're going to like it or not. Mm-hmm. And so I spent the first 4 years on city council very much focused on my district and focused on kind of smaller issues within making my little kingdom of Fayette County do really well. And then the last 4 years, I was named budget chair for the entire city. And so those 4 years really were critical because we were going through COVID, we were going through lots of uncertainties, the workforce. And being chair of the Budget, Economic Development, and Finance Committee, I really played a stronger role in developing the city's budget, deciding how we were going to manage employment at that time, how we were going to handle economic development and getting a good workforce. And so that kind of broadened my scope more citywide. And towards the end of that time, I really realized how important our relationship with Frankfort was, and needing to have a voice in Frankfort that maybe was a little more in tune with what was going on in Fayette County and could be a strong advocate for our needs, but also kind of grow the conversation. There's oftentimes we would say, well, the state, has responsibility for that road, or the state has the policy on X. And so getting a chance to take what my experience and background and really what I learned on the city council and be a good advocate in Frankfort for us was really why I decided to run.
Do you think, I think about serving in those capacities, either city council or moving up to state legislature, and how a lot of times people look at the people in those positions and think that's the person that's doing all the work. But there's such an involved network of people behind the scenes, not necessarily even associated with your office, but just people in the community, people working in Lexington that are kind of working hand in hand with city council to do these things. The state level is no different. I'm sure you have people that are community leaders in their own right who are working with you. And it's not just here's this elected person and then here's the people that live in this area, but there's like this whole layer of like people who are intimately involved in progressing things for their communities, right?
Absolutely. I think not just about, we have government relations people or lobbyists and advocates. Everybody plays a role in those conversations, and advocacy is really important. When you look at, not just in my district, but let's just take Fayette County in general, there are lots of people who run into maybe a situation with a tax policy or run into a KRS that maybe because of the technology has changed, and they say, hey, I can no longer do something, I need help. So usually legislation results from an issue in a community or a specific a topic that maybe need to be addressed, and that advocacy leads to legislation. And so you're exactly right. It takes multiple people to get a bill passed, and that takes lots of different buy-in, lots of different stakeholders, lots of communications, and those relationships throughout the district really help steer, I think, legislation. And that's what ends up being statewide legislation.
Let's talk a little bit about your time in the Senate and the area that you represent. When you first describe your district to someone who is unfamiliar with it, what do you want them to understand about the area that you represent?
So I think about it kind of like a central Kentucky. My district has south part of Fayette, but also Woodford, Mercer, and Boyle. So when you look at the three of those rural counties, I think of a lot more of the ag community, a lot more horses, cattle are stronger because they have more land than we do. When I think about the district as a whole, I think a lot more about higher ed. We have quite a bit of higher ed institutions just in my own 12th district, not to mention when you include UK as a part of that piece. So it's a highly educated district. It's a highly engaged district. It really is involved in some of our more signature industries when you think about bourbon and horses as being pretty critical, and healthcare. So it's a beautiful area of the state. I think we have kind of the crown jewel of the bourbon horse country.
I was going to ask, when you talk about these industries and the people there, what are the top 2 or 3 needs that you hear most from your constituents in that area?
I think the biggest need is infrastructure. We have a lot of people who live and work in Fayette County. We think about 52% of the workforce comes in every day, over 100,000 people to participate in Fayette County's work environment. And so all the roads, all the burden on the infrastructure is pretty intense. We have an aging sewer, wastewater treatment plants. We have a lot of pipes that have been around for a long time that are in need of upgrading, roads that have a lot of pressure on them. And that probably is the biggest, traffic, infrastructure are probably the biggest needs that everyone that benefits from. When you fix a road, it's not just for one person, it's everybody who drives, you know, those big intersections.
I think about areas outside of Lexington. The University of Kentucky has representation across the state. Primarily, I think about Extension and our Martin Gatton College of Agriculture, Food and Environment and the work that they do, but we have so much representation from different colleges and departments and units who are doing everything from research to education and trying to get a workforce ready to go back into these areas. You know, UK's land grant mission is service to the whole Commonwealth. From your perspective, what does that look like when that works well?
It's a really important role that the University of Kentucky plays in that mission. And so one of the things that you think about at the University of Kentucky, there's a lot of buy-in just for the name. You know, University of Louisville, Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, they have niches. But UK really does have that holistic feeling about it just when you even say the name. And so there's a lot of buy-in, I think, in our state for just the success of UK in general. And as far as its mission, you know, when you think about the agricultural nature of Kentucky, we are very diverse in many ways, and yet we have some really distinct areas across our state that need different help. And so having the mission that's specific to each region and each area really is important because it maximizes the benefits and the assets they really have. What looks like in Western Kentucky and the flat plains and some of the ag is very different than what we see in Eastern Kentucky. And so it takes a university that's got a lot of diversity and a lot of ability really to have the widespread differences of experts to really maximize the benefit. And as Kentucky does well, we all benefit in that.
Looking to the next few years, where do you see opportunities for the university and the state legislature to really partner together on some things?
I think about two areas in particular, research and then in healthcare. I think when I think about research, I think about AI and other technologies and areas that are people kind of close to the grassroots have something, and so working with the university helps spur that along, and it has the tools of which to do some really cool research. And we're in a really unique time for that. And then I think on the healthcare space, you know, my dad had cancer, terminal cancer, 30 years ago, passed away 20 years ago. We didn't have the research in the healthcare we have today. He went outside of our state for years to get treatments, and so he could have kind of the best of the best at the time. Well, now we have a healthcare system here at UK that really does have the best, and you can better access people from the eastern parts of our state or south or west can come here and really get what they would have gotten in some of the top tier institutions outside Kentucky without the travel, without the hotels, those kinds of things. So I think those are two really big pieces that the university and the state really benefit from.
In your work, you're deeply involved in fiscal policy. How do you weigh public investment in higher ed and research? What outcomes matter the most to you in that regard?
You know, it's really hard to measure ROI sometimes on these things. You know, a quality of someone's life, they living longer, all of that is a huge return on investment for that family. And so as we think about investment in higher ed, and they have a better quality of life as a person, they change the direction probably of generations. We know that those who have college degrees or graduate degrees are able to make more money just as a bottom line long term. That then enables the next generation to make a little more. So it has a very strong domino effect when you think about bringing first generation kids to the university and putting them on a path to long-term success is really important. That's a huge ROI, because they in turn will make more resources that will benefit through the income tax and through buying and purchasing of generational wealth. That's important. I think the other thing that I think about in terms of long-term investment is when we think about, let's just take Medicaid and healthcare in particular. If we can control the cost of Medicaid through advancements in technology and health policies, then that will have a direct impact on reducing the state's burden in that area. And the end result of that is we have better health care for people and less burden and financial burden on the state. those are mutually beneficial for people. And so I think about those investments as being very much important and valuable.
You mentioned AI, and I have been looking forward to this conversation because I wanted to talk to you about this. One area where Kentucky's been moving quickly is technology policy, especially AI, and you've been at the front of this. So tell me a little bit, and listeners who may not be familiar, I want to talk about SB4 and kind of when we talk about responsible AI governance, what that means, and kind of give me a little background on SB4 and kind of how that came to be.
Sure. I do not have a technological background. My undergrad was in philosophy and classics, and when people heard that I was working in the AI stuff, they said, really? Is that really the best use of your skill set? And I said, no, I don't know some of the terminology we're using, but I do understand the philosophy and responsibility of developing a policy and a framework of how we think about using AI. And what it really comes down to is how do we govern the privacy issues that we have as a state, and also trying to put some guardrails around making sure that we're being responsible with the use of AI, where it is, where it's not, where we should lean in, where there's low risk, where we should lean back when there's high risk, and be really thoughtful about developing that policy. So Senate Bill 4 came from kind of that desire to set a framework for how Kentucky would move forward. We made a very strategic decision not to garner the private sector and to leave that up to more federal conversations, because it really is hard. Everyone is using across state lines, especially in technology space, to govern state to state through patchwork. And so we spent most of our time talking about how Kentucky would, as a state government, monitor it. For instance, when we think about privacy, you get on ChatGPT or an OpenAI and you start putting information, that goes someplace else. It goes into a place that's not protected, could be shared, show up in someone else's documents or research. And so that is not something good we want for Kentuckians in terms of their own privacy and information they give the state. So setting up a process to ensure that as we develop really cool tools, and there are some that I think will improve state government efficiency, that will maybe streamline some processes and make it easier for constituents to be served by the state, we want to be very mindful that as we do those tools, that we're protecting where that information goes and so it's not shared.
Are there some elements of this that change kind of how state government can use AI in general?
A little bit. We developed a framework that said you have to have if someone called and said, we want to know how Kentucky's using AI, we wanted to be able to tell them. So that there's a database that shows all the different places where we've had which software is being used, by whom, for what purpose. So there's a lot of transparency, which I think was really important. And I also think, AI is not spell check. There's lots of, when you go, we've been using kind of technologies that are not necessarily generative. They're not developing something new. So the idea was not to govern the small things, but to really govern the big things. When you're putting information together and coming up with a new result, when you're making a decision-making tool, that needs much greater scrutiny and accountability. So there's going to be a group that oversees those decisions, a committee, and the committee at the state government level will look to make sure that we're being thoughtful and responsible about those kind of tools that we might use.
SB4 also touches on AI-generated deceptive political content. What is the risk that you're most concerned about when it comes to this for voters?
I think that the challenge now is that anybody can develop an AI-generated video or a meme that looks really true. Mm-hmm. In fact, I used to laugh with the kids, don't believe everything you see. Now I feel like we're telling all the adults, don't believe everything you see. Be really mindful, be very thoughtful. But when you think about an election, you're asking, when you put out your videos, you can be very honest about it. When you do an attack ad or maybe a contrast ad, the goal is to show a contrast. But showing something that did not happen or a false reality, that I feel like is a deception to the voters. And that is misleading and fraudulent. The challenge is, what happens when that happens right before the vote? There's a reason why we were trying to give some time so that let's pretend someone pretends to be Michael Adams and gets up and puts out a TV ad and says, everyone go vote tomorrow. And tomorrow's not election day. Or they say vote on Thursday and the election day was Tuesday, and someone sees that, hears that, and thinks, oh, we moved it. And they miss out. And those elections, as we know, have consequences. Mm-hmm. And so that's really our concern, is trying to make sure that what you see is real and true, and you're not misrepresenting to the point of being false something that there's not time to get response to.
So we're building this framework with this. We're looking ahead to tackling other issues as they come up. So looking ahead as far as AI issues go, and we've got a lot of places you could go into: privacy, protection for minors, consumer protections, workforce protections, things like that. What's next on your radar for kind of how we kind of develop this out and scale up?
All of it. I think that's the challenge with AI, is that it's in absolutely everything. And there's so many great uses for it. I mean, I think about the opportunities in healthcare especially. What they're able to do now, I mean, there's been some advancement in the UK in particular that have been phenomenal. And they're serving people exceptionally well. And yet, like any other tool, you can build a house or tear it down with a hammer. It's going to be used for bad things. And so those protections on minors, I think, are really important. I think the deceptive marketing with consumer protection with adults, people who call and pretend they're a grandson of somebody and convince them to send money, those kind of things are real. And if you're not mindful of what you're doing and kind of asking the follow-up questions, it can be really damaging to a lot of people. And so that tension between allowing freedom and allowing opportunity of innovation and also trying to mitigate the impact on minors in particular. I mean, when you look at some of the chatbots who have convinced kids to commit suicide and taken them down very dark paths, that's not good. And so I think there's a responsibility we have as lawmakers to provide that tension, to allow innovation, but also try to provide it. And it's really hard. And I think it's gonna change a lot over the next several years. We'll constantly be kind of tweaking, updating, challenging as it moves. And it's a real opportunity, and it's also a real challenge.
From where you're sitting, the position you have, where do you see UK fitting into this AI future in the Commonwealth when it comes to research or training or policy expertise or whatever the topic might be?
All of it. And I say that because I've had a number of people from UK come and testify as a part of the AI task force, because they offer different expertise in different places. From a research perspective, I think it's really important. How we educate kids is no longer, professors teaching. If they're submitting documents or textbook or answers and they want to know is this true or not, it takes a professor knowing and training kids on how to do it appropriately and to recognize this is true or this is not. You used an AI tool. A professor was telling me that he's actually had an assignment to one of the kids, so they have to use AI and then they have to grade the AI document as a way of showing how to be critical thinkers. That's the kind of stuff we need to develop in kids, in college kids in particular, so that when they get out of college, they know the difference in how to use AI appropriately to maximize its benefits and mitigate its challenges. I think about in the healthcare space, they were talking a little bit about how they developed an AI tool that if a woman has breast cancer and they're redeveloping her breast, that they can make it exactly the way it was before. Think about that from a female perspective of knowing that that's some very intimate challenge to you, and they're able to provide that to where it looks and feels the same as it did before. That's massive. And that was an AI tool that was developed right here. So there's a lot of opportunities on the energy side in particular about how we're going to maximize making sure we have enough capacity to do all the things we want. UK is a big player and a big partner in those.
We talked before we started recording about kids. You've got high school age kids. I've got a kid in elementary school. You've taught at the college level, correct?
Mm-hmm.
If a student's listening to this, or you have an opportunity to talk to students and they're wondering about, at whatever age, how to prepare for this AI-shaped world that we're now inhabiting, what are some skills or habits that you think you would prioritize to tell them about?
You think about AI as almost like a calculator. My son's in calculus. He has a very fancy calculator. He gives that to me. I can do add, I can subtract, I can do some things, but I can't maximize its use because, quite frankly, I don't have the education to use it to its full capacity. And so as we think about kindergartners all the way up through high school, it's going to take a spectrum of understanding how to use the add and subtract, as a kindergarten level, but also how you can continue to use the AI tools to benefit your education. It's really interesting on the individualized learning. We have kids that need maybe extra training on how to use words and sentences. Well, there's an AI tool that would help 30 minutes with that kid learn all the different ways to use this word differently. Well, for someone on the spectrum, for instance, that's a great tool. And it helps them think about those words maybe outside their initial perspective. So there's a great opportunity for individualized learning in AI from in that spectrum, if you will, that I think could be great. And so helping kids learn, again, where to think about it being an innovative tool that will help them do their life better, help them learn better, I think is great. But also not it being a crutch. You know, it can't solve problems for you. Eventually, you're going to figure out you have to solve the problem on your own. But if it can help you provide aid so that you understand it better, I think that's a wonderful thing to help kids do. But it has to be monitored, and that's where parents, I think, are going to have to be a little more proactive in their kids' education from all the way up of knowing what's appropriate and when.
Senator, I've had a great time talking. I want to be mindful of the time that we have with you, so we'll kind of close some things out. But just want to ask you kind of one last question. What gives you hope about Kentucky's future right now?
I think Kentucky is uniquely situated for so many things. We're in the heart of the country, between 6-hour drive of 75% of the country's population. We have an opportunity between transportation-wise between 75 and 64 to really be a magnet and a hub for innovation, for workforce, and for produce. I mean, it is a really interesting, just a physical place where we live. Not to mention we're one of the beautiful places in the world. I think having the Appalachian Mountains, to having the plains, to having some of the unique lakes, quite frankly, in Kentucky, we are a really unique place to live, and we're a special place to live. And Kentuckians are hardworking, innovative people. So I'm really excited, I think, about Kentucky's future. I think we have a bright one. We have nothing but opportunity in front of us, just with the capacity of land that we have outside maybe Fayette County to continue to grow as a state. And people are very interested in moving here. We're developing a climate fiscally that is sound, that has good business environment if you want to move here. But also if you're a remote to work learner, a worker, and you want to be here because we have such great opportunity to have Lexington, Northern Kentucky, and Louisville has great amenities if you're wanting to have a bigger city approach, and then you can drive in outside and hike the gorge. There's nothing, I mean, it really is a unique place to be, and I have great hopes for Kentucky's future.
Excellent. Well, Senator Amanda Mays Bledsoe has been our guest. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch or listen to Behind the Blue. Thanks for listening to Behind the Blue. Behind the Blue is a production of the University of Kentucky. For more stories about how the University of Kentucky is advancing our Commonwealth, visit uknow.uky.edu.